Hello, my name is Nicole Matthews, and this is my presentation for the final class project for CSE335 in the spring semester of 2017. So the name of the app that I created was called Remember Me Notes, and the main idea behind this app was to build a virtual bulletin board of sorts. I wanted to be able to make an app that users could use to store, access, and remember different types of notes in. Similar to how a bulletin board functions. Through the development of this app, I found that there were 4 different types of notes that I wanted to create. One was a simple post-it notes function, which stored a name and a date as well as the note details. And this is similar to any type of notepad that you may implement. The second type of note was a photo note, which stored a detail or a date and a photo that was selected. These photos were stored in a UI collection view, which I'll talk about a little later. Thirdly, I wanted to store important dates, which basically stored different event information. Each event had an associated name, date, location, and time, and this was stored in core data. And finally, we had web links, which function similar to the bookmarks function of a browser, meaning it stored a name, a date, and an associated URL that the user could then use and load through the app. So the app layout for all 4 of these types of notes is very similar. So on this slide, I've only laid out the post-it note layout. However, it does represent, for the most part, the layout for all 4 functions. Please feel free to go through and look at these functions after this presentation. So the first screen that you see right here is the screen that's loaded after the app launches. It has 4 buttons. Each one goes to its selected note type table. If the user was to click on post-it notes, they'd be brought to the second screen, which shows any archived notes in a table view. Each table view cell holds the note name as well as the date that was saved with this note and the first amount of the note details. If the user was to click on the plus icon on this screen, they'd be taken to another screen that looked similar to this, where they could store a new post-it note. They must enter both the name, the date, and some form of note details in order for the note to be stored. Otherwise, they'll be told that there was invalid input and be prompted to enter this information again. Lastly, if the user was to click on the arrow in either of these cells, they'd be taken to the details page of the note, which just shows the note name along with the note details in a text view that's scrollable and the date that the note was associated with. So this is the class diagram for my project. Firstly, I'd like to point out that there were 3 different types of UI table view cells that I created and 1 UI collection view cell. If you look at the top here, you can see that I made 3 different UI table view cells: a note table view cell, a date table view cell, and a web link table view cell. Each of these were pretty similar. They all stored labels that showed the information associated with the selected entry. The note table view cell had a name, a date, and the note details. The date table view cell had the name, date, time, and location of each date that was selected, and the web link table view cell had the name, date, and URL for the selected URL that was saved. And then finally, for the photo gallery, since this was implemented using UI collection view and not UI table view, I made a custom collection view cell also, which just held a photo so that I could show the photo in a gallery-like fashion. Then underneath this, you can see the different view controllers that were implemented. There were 12 different view controllers for this project, 3 for each type of note. These were all laid out, again, very similar to each other. Each type of note had a main page, which showed the archived notes. It had a add new note page, which allowed the user to add a new entry to data. And it had a details page, which just showed the details of a selected note in that category. Since these are all quite similar, I don't want to go too detailed into each and every one, but I do want to point out a couple of them because some of them are unique. For starters, I wanted to look at the photo gallery view controller down here. The photo gallery was completely implemented using UI collection view, which is very similar to table view, except that it's storing items in like a matrix type fashion instead of a table. And so I had to go through and figure out what data source and delegate methods were needed to implement this type of view. Here you can see the different data source and delegate methods right here. They were quite similar again to the table view, but there were a few differences in how you delete an entry in the collection view, as well as how the collection view is seen and set up. The second thing I'd like to point out is the UI web view that I implemented on the web links detail page up here. I wanted to load any of the URLs that the user put into the data structure through the app instead of having them just have to copy and paste the URL. And so on the details page of the web links type, I included a embedded web browser, which was completely interactive. The user could navigate back and forth from a page that they saved and selected to view, and they could interact with the page. Lastly, I wanted to point out the map view that was implemented in the important dates detailed view controller, which is right here. I wanted to make this more user-friendly, and so I decided that for the important dates, if the user entered location data that was accurate enough, they would be shown a map with a pin that showed where this date was to occur. So in the dates detailed view, I had to include the map kit and a geocoder to show this information and show all the relevant information of the event, which you can see in my app if you run it. Again, all of these different types of notes were quite similar in function as far as their view controllers go, but feel free to look through each and every one. There are slight differences as in like the different elements and attributes of each entity, because not every entity stored the same attributes. So next I have my MVC diagram. To start, the view controller and the view's main function was to display the lists of post-it notes, important dates, web links, and pictures, and to interact with the user through these lists. The user was able to update different cells with the most current data from core data, and this would be reflected in the view, as well as showing the web view for the web links and the map view for the important dates location data. Finally, the view allowed users to add new items to each of the different types of notes, and it allowed users to see the previously archived notes from core data. You then look at the controller. The controller always interacts between the view and the model, thus MVC architecture. So the controller fetched any archives of notes, whether it be photos, post-it notes, important dates, or web links from core data, and it prepares all the information for segues between the different views. It also updates any of the views with any new information put in to the model by the user, and it stores new notes in core data. And like I said, it coordinates between the model and the view. Lastly, you have the model, which basically has to do with how the data is stored. It's mostly dealing with core data and how it stores the different types of notes, the different attributes that are associated with these notes, and how it deals with accessing these notes. It updates the controller when there are changes to the core data store, and it also holds any backup functions such as deletion methods, formatting and editing, etc. Um, so yeah, that's my MVC architecture. For this app, there were many different capabilities as well as limitations. To start off, I wanted to start with the capabilities of this app. This app allows users to store information in core data for the lifetime of the app. It stores notes, photos, important dates, and web links. And these entries will not be lost unless the user chooses to delete the information themselves. That brings me to the second point. This information isn't stored forever. They do have the option to delete this information, so they can choose whether they want to save the notes forever or if they want to get rid of them and clear out their notes archive. I also implemented a UI web view for the web links, which is a major capability. Instead of trying to load another app or the browser on their phone, I wanted to be able to load the web view information and the URL in the app, and so I embedded a UI web view inside of the app so that the user can run any of the URLs that they store in the app and interact with these URLs to make it more convenient for the user. Lastly, my app does utilize the map view and map kit of Swift to show where an event is occurring. This draws upon the location data that the user implemented or the user inputted for their event, and it is relatively accurate given the information that the user provides. There are some limitations, however. Core data cannot be shared between different devices and it cannot be edited at this time. I didn't implement editing functions in this version of the app. That's something that I would like to do later so that the user can edit any of the notes they store instead of having to delete it and re-enter this information. So that would definitely be something that I want to implement in the future. Also, the user, for the web view URLs, it has to be inputted as an HTTPS, etc. for the URL. It has to have the specific input. And a lot of people don't store web URLs that way. Most people don't go around with the security protocols part of the URL. And so this is kind of a limitation. I do want to include string parsing in the future so that the user doesn't have to input this information, but rather just input the user-friendly version of the URL. Another limitation to this app is that there weren't any sections implemented in the table view or collection view for the notes. I really wanted to implement sections where you could see all the notes stored with a certain date attached to them in each type of note, but I couldn't figure out how to do the different sections. So this is definitely something that I would like to do in the future. I think it would increase the organization of the app, and I truly think that it would benefit the user in the future. So some lessons that I learned through this project, I definitely went into this project with a lacking information on core data. And so by working with the 4 different entities that I created, I really understood and learned how to use core data appropriately for this project. I learned how to create different entities and how to use and store and access these entities, as well as deleting entries from these entities, which was a great lesson. Secondly, I learned how to implement the UI web view functionalities. We didn't specifically have a assignment associated with WebView, and I really did find it fascinating. So throughout this project, I was able to learn a little bit more about what goes into a WebView and how one can implement an embedded WebView in their app. I also gained some more information on MapKit and Gcoder functionalities. I had to implement these for the important dates note type, and so I had to go through and learn how to fetch the data from core data and use it to load the map view correctly. A huge struggle for me on this project was the UI collection view and figuring out how to store the photos appropriately in the collection view. And so throughout this project, I learned how to not only create a collection view, but how to format it so that it came out the way that I wanted. I do want to learn further about the UI collection view because it certainly is its own unique view that can be utilized to do many different things, but I really enjoyed learning how to do this through this project. And lastly, this project uh, helped further support my knowledge in the MVC architecture. I really had to make sure that I was following the model view controller architecture to make sure that everything was placed in their own categories. With having 4 different entities in this project, it was incredibly important that I follow this architecture, and so this project allowed me to further cement this knowledge. Um, Lastly, for some suggestions and improvements of the class, I do think that it would have been nice to have some more resources provided. I know that at times I really struggled with some of the projects because it was so hard to find resources that made sense and were relevant to the things that we were learning. So maybe having a textbook or more PowerPoints available could really be helpful in grasping the information taught in this class. In terms of the class project, I think it would be really nice to have some specific lab time or class time designated towards the final project. I know that as the due date came, I felt more and more stressed about this project, and I really would have appreciated having some lab time specifically designated for the class project because it is such a huge part of our course. It would have been nice to have that. It would have also been nice to start brainstorming ideas for the project sooner in the semester. I felt that this project was incredibly rushed since it was at the end of the semester and all classes have class projects at this time. It would have been really nice to get a head start on it sooner, and it would have been helpful to have more examples of what was expected for the project. I did utilize the examples that were given, but it would have been really nice to see some good quality examples and understand what was looked for in this project. Lastly, I think that it would be really nice if we could hold lab classes in a classroom or a lab that had Mac computers. As one of the students who didn't have a Mac in this class, it was incredibly difficult and time consuming to have to go to Brickyard all the time, and I really would have liked having the resources of the TAs and the professor at the lab while I was working on my projects during lab time instead of having to be away from the classroom to do my lab. So maybe holding lab lectures at Brickyard or someplace with Macs would be really helpful. And that's my class project.